All right, so now that we know what different percentages are, we use these bar models, and we knew that the whole thing was 100%, and we talked about how half of it was 50%. So now we're going to think about how could we find a percent of a number using that bar model. So the first example I'm going to use is finding 80% of 80. So we know we can think of it as the whole thing being 100%. So remember, this would be 10%. So if I colored in this first block, that would represent 10%. If I colored in the second one, it would be 20. So at first, if it helps you, if you want to fill all these in to kind of help you, or if you want to do it the whole time, that's fine. And it just helps you kind of visualize that. So these are my percents. And on the top, I'm looking at the number 80. So I always start at 0, and then I put my number, the whole amount, at the very end, because 100% of 80 is 80. Then, just like I divided 100 into 10 parts, I need to divide 80 into 10 parts. So 80 divided by 10 is 8. So I'm going to count by 8s. I can then go right to where I'm like, I need 80%. Well, there's 80%. Oh, that's 64. Now I can color in that bar model to represent that I've taken up all 80% of 80. But I can also just look right there. So I know that 80% of 80 is 64. Let's take a look at a couple others. If I do 30% of 50, remember, this is still 100 down here, and this is still 0%. And then this would be 0, and my whole number is 50, so that is what goes down there. 10%, 20%, 30% is what I want. So when I do it, I always stop at the percent that I need. That way I don't accidentally go over and do more. Then I need to do 50 divided by 10, which is 5. So we're going to count by 5s, and I just have to stop right there. So 30% of 50 is the number 15. Next one is 25% of 60. So what you might remember is if I have a half of a percent, so 25 is halfway between 20 and 30. So if I'm looking at my percents, I've got 10, 20, and I've got 30. So 25% would be right here in the middle. So my number is 60, so I'm going to still do my same, 60 divided by 10, which is 6. I'm going to count by 6, and I'm like, oh, so if 25% is between 20 and 30, then my answer is between 12 and 18. So I need to figure out what's halfway between 12 and 18. Well, the distance between them is 6, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. So if I count up 3, halfway between here is 15. So 25% of 60 is 15. Some examples where this would help us. There are 30 students in Mr. Robertson's homeroom, and 45% of those students ride the bus. So I want to know how many kids that actually is. So once again, 0 and 100% and 0 and 30, because there are 30 kids in the room. And we want 45%. So 10, 20, 30, 40, and it's 45, so I need to go 50 and think what's in between here. 45%. 30 divided by 10 is 3. So 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. Now remember from the problem above, I take what I'm counting by and divide that by 2. Well, that gives me 1 1/2. So that would put me at 13 1/2. Now, we can't have half of a child. Parents are not happy when we only send home half of a child. So what I would do here, I can't have half of a child, so I may need to bump up or bump down. So it would be 13 or 14 kids or students who ride the bus. On my next one, Helena makes $500 per week, and she puts 15% of her paycheck in savings. How much money does she put into savings? So she makes $500. That's going to be my top number. And then my percent, remember, goes down here. So I would have 10%, 20%, 15% is right in the middle. My 500 divided by 10, I'm going to count by 50s. Halfway between 50 and 100, well, think about quarters, so 75 cents or 75. So she put $75 in savings when she gets her paycheck. On the back here is your partner practice, and you're going to continue doing those and setting those up, and you'll be able to go on Schoology and put in your answers and see if they are correct.